making it laws where you can't drink when you want to.
The 1980s were a loud, bright, and rebellious time. Big hair, louder music, and a whole lot less regulation. People raised kids without car seats, smoked at the dinner table, and trusted sketchy playgrounds made of metal and concrete. Life wasn't exactly safe, but it sure was different. Today, half the things people did back then would get you fined, arrested, or investigated. So let's take a look at normal things from the 1980s that are now completely illegal. No car seats or seatbelt use for kids. Back in the day, you didn't need a car seat for your kid. You just plopped them in the back seat or even the front and hoped for the best. Seatbelt optional. Some families didn't even use them at all. And if your kid fell asleep during a long drive, you made them a pillow fort on the back seat floor. Today, there are entire books of car seat laws, and not strapping your kid in properly can cost you big. But for 1980s parents, it was just called going to grandma's house. Children walking home alone. Letting your child walk home alone from school? Totally normal. They had house keys on shoelaces around their necks and made themselves instant noodles while waiting for mom to get home from work. No phone, no supervision, and no panic. Today, if a neighbor spots a child walking solo, you might get a knock on the door from Child Protective Services. But back then, it was just part of growing up. Smoking in restaurants, planes, hospitals. You could walk into a restaurant and get seated next to someone chain smoking through their steak dinner. Even airplanes had ashtrays in every armrest. Smoking sections existed, sure, but the smoke never stayed put. Hospitals, offices, even schools sometimes had designated areas for smokers. Now, most states have banned indoor smoking completely. Try lighting up at a Chili's today and you'll be escorted out before you can say Marlboro Light. Unsafe metal playgrounds. If you grew up in the 1980s, your childhood was probably filled with playground equipment that doubled as injury traps. Metal slides that scorched your skin in the sun, spinning merry-go-rounds that launched kids like frisbees, and seesaws that acted more like catapults. Most of it was built on concrete or gravel. These days, playgrounds have rubber flooring, height restrictions, and safety inspections. Back then, if you weren't bruised by the end of recess, you weren't playing hard enough. Lawn darts. Everyone remembers lawn darts, or as some parents now call them, lawsuit darts. These were real metal missiles with heavy tips meant to be thrown high into the air and land in small plastic rings on the ground. Unsurprisingly, several kids were seriously hurt, and tragically, a few even killed. After enough lawsuits and public outcry, the U.S. government banned them in 1988. But if you grew up in the 80s, dodging lawn darts was just part of the fun. Kids buying cigarettes for parents. Here's one you'll barely believe. Kids could buy cigarettes for their parents. All you needed was a handwritten note saying, "Let Johnny buy a pack of Marlboros." Some store clerks didn't even ask. There were cigarette vending machines in diners, bowling alleys, and even some grocery stores. Today, that idea sounds insane. But in the 1980s, nobody blinked. Smoking was everywhere, and kids were part of the system whether they smoked or not. If this is bringing back memories, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people discover these nostalgic flashbacks, and if you remember doing any of these things, drop your favorite in the comments. High school smoking sections. Want to really feel the whiplash of the times? Some high schools had smoking areas for students. Not just teachers puffing away in the lounge, students had their own outdoor spots to light up between classes. It wasn't even hidden. You'd walk by and see a whole crowd of teens smoking before the next bell. Today, bringing a vape pen to school can get you suspended or even arrested. But back then, the school smoking wall was just another hallway hangout. Drinking and driving tolerated. In the 1980s, drinking and driving didn't carry the same weight it does now. Some cops would just tell you to go home and sleep it off. Open containers were everywhere, especially in rural areas. It wasn't until the later part of the decade that zero-tolerance campaigns, harsher DUI penalties, and advocacy groups like MAD started to shift public opinion. Now, getting behind the wheel after even one drink can cost you your license, your job, or your life. Widespread use of lead-based paint and gasoline. Lead was everywhere. Leaded gasoline. Lead-based paint. Even toys had lead paint. Cribs and baby furniture were coated in it. At the time, it seemed fine. It made colors pop and paint last longer. But once researchers linked lead exposure to brain damage, especially in kids, laws changed fast. By 1996, leaded gas was officially banned in the U.S., and lead paint had been phased out of homes. But in the 80s, it was still just another thing we didn't question. Dangerous school chemistry sets. Another one that flew under the radar, unsafe chemistry sets. Toy stores sold science kits with real chemicals, sometimes even including small bits of uranium ore. Mercury thermometers were passed around in classrooms like toys, and goggles were more of a suggestion than a rule. Today, the same experiments require lab clearance, safety gear, and in some schools, a permission slip. But in the 80s, science was just a little more explosive. Halfway through, and we're just getting warmed up. If you're enjoying the ride, consider subscribing. We've got more forgotten stories and deep dives into the decades that shaped us, so don't miss out. VHS tape piracy. Before the internet, VHS piracy was the national pastime. You'd rent a tape, pop in a blank, hit record, and just like that, you owned a bootleg copy of Top Gun. Some people even built massive tape collections this way. It was technically illegal, but enforcement was nearly non-existent. Today, duplicating copyrighted content, even digitally, can get you DMCA strikes, fines, or a federal case. But back then, everyone had at least one friend with a home theater of copied tapes. No bike helmets. Kids rode bikes without helmets. Actually, most people did. Helmets were seen as unnecessary or uncool. You would cruise down hills, pop wheelies, and race your friend's helmet free. No one thought twice about it. Parents rarely brought it up, and schools did not push safety campaigns. It was all about freedom and fun. But then came the statistics. Rising numbers of head injuries forced lawmakers to act. Now, in many areas, it is illegal for kids to ride bikes, scooters, or skateboards without a helmet. And in some places, parents can even be fined for letting it slide. Fireworks sold to and used by kids. Fireworks were a 4th of July staple, but in the 1980s, they were not just limited to big city shows. Kids could buy bottle rockets, Roman candles, and sparklers from roadside stands with no adult supervision. There were no age checks and very few warnings. Neighborhoods turned into miniature war zones each summer, filled with smoke, explosions, and minor burns. Parents usually looked the other way or joined in. Today, most states have banned or severely restricted fireworks sales, especially to minors. What was once a summer ritual is now a carefully regulated event with strict safety guidelines. Riding in the back of pickup trucks. Here's a wild one: students could ride in the back of pickup trucks. It wasn't just for moving furniture. Friends piled into the bed and rode around town like it was a parade float. In some places, kids even rode to school that way. Today, that's illegal in most states, especially on highways, and for good reason. But in the 1980s, it was just another ride to baseball practice. School paddling. Paddling was still allowed in many schools. If you acted up, the principal might take out a wooden paddle and give you a few swats. It was written into the school code, and some parents even supported it. Corporal punishment was seen as discipline, not abuse. That's changed drastically. Today, only a few states still allow paddling in schools, and even then it's heavily regulated. The rest of the country has left that behind. Candy cigarettes. Candy cigarettes were everywhere. They looked exactly like the real thing. Some even had red tips to simulate a lit end. You'd puff on the powdered sugar and pretend to exhale smoke. For a kid, it was just play. But eventually, people realized it was also teaching kids that smoking was fun. Laws didn't just target the candy itself, they targeted the idea. Packaging changed, names changed, and in some places, the candies were banned altogether. Backyard burning of trash. Burn barrels and backyard incinerators were a normal part of life in the suburbs and countryside. People burned leaves, trash, and even old furniture. No sorting, no recycling, just toss it in and light a match. Today, burning household waste is illegal in most parts of the US, and air quality regulations are strict. But if you were around in the 80s, the smell of burning leaves was just part of fall. Sharing prescription drugs. Even prescription drugs were handled more loosely. People shared painkillers and antibiotics like they were Tylenol. It wasn't seen as dangerous, just helpful. Leftover meds were passed to friends or family. Today, sharing prescription drugs is illegal and considered drug trafficking in many states. What seemed like kindness in the 80s could now earn you a felony charge. Kids riding bikes in the dark without lights or reflectors. In the 1980s, it wasn't unusual to see kids riding their bikes after sunset with no lights, no reflectors, and definitely no high visibility gear. You'd pedal home from a friend's house or the corner store in complete darkness, maybe relying on the occasional streetlight to guide your way. No one wore reflective vests. No one thought it was dangerous. It was just what you did. Today, biking at night without proper visibility gear like front and rear lights or reflective clothing is illegal in many states and cities. Laws now require bikes to be equipped with reflectors and lights, especially after dusk. What used to be a simple ride home is now a ticketable offense if you're not lit up like a Christmas tree. Another example of how much nighttime safety has changed. Riding without a driver's license on farms or neighborhood roads. In the 1980s, it wasn't uncommon for teens or even preteens to drive pickup trucks, tractors, or old sedans around the farm, down dirt roads, or even through small neighborhoods. Some families saw it as a rite of passage. You learned how to drive before you learned algebra. Law enforcement often looked the other way if it was just down the road. But today, getting behind the wheel without a license isn't just frowned upon, it's a serious offense that can come with huge fines, criminal records, or even jail time. Kids now need learner's permits, driving instructors, and lots of paperwork, but in the 80s, sometimes you just got the keys and figured it out in the pasture. Hitchhiking across town or across the country. Hitchhiking used to be seen as adventurous, economical, even romantic. You'd stick out your thumb and catch a ride with a stranger, no questions asked. There were even unofficial hitchhiking routes across the U.S. that young people used for travel or to get home from college. But that all changed as stories of abductions, assaults, and serial killers made national headlines. Now, hitchhiking is banned in many states, especially on highways. Even where it's not technically illegal, most drivers are too afraid to stop, and most parents would never dream of letting their kid try it. The age of the thumb is over. Leaving kids in the car alone. In the 1980s, parents ran errands while their kids waited in the car with the windows up. Grocery store, pharmacy, DMV line. The kids stayed behind reading comics or playing with toys in the back seat. It was seen as normal, just part of the routine. But nowadays, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle is illegal in many places, especially during hot or cold weather. Even a few minutes can lead to police involvement, criminal charges, and public outrage. The laws have changed, and so has the perception of what's safe parenting. No life jackets while boating or swimming. Life jackets were more of a suggestion in the 1980s. Kids would hop on boats, inner tubes, or water skis without anything resembling a flotation device. Lakes, rivers, backyard pools, swimming unsupervised was just another summer day. But rising drowning rates and high-profile tragedies changed the laws. Today, boating laws in most states require kids, and often adults, to wear Coast Guard-approved life jackets. Some places even require them for certain water sports regardless of age. The carefree water days of the 80s are long gone. Now it's all about visibility, supervision, and regulation. Bringing peanut butter sandwiches to school. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were a lunchbox classic. Nearly every kid had one, and trading snacks was a daily ritual. But times have changed. The rise in severe peanut allergies has led to sweeping changes in school lunch policies. Many schools today are entirely peanut-free zones, and bringing anything with peanuts can get your lunch confiscated or send a classmate to the hospital. In the 1980s, peanut butter was as American as apple pie. Now it's a public health risk in certain environments. If you brought a peanut butter and jelly sandwich today, you might be called into the principal's office. The 1980s were bold, brash, and built on a totally different rule book. It was a time when risk was part of life, and no one thought twice about what might now be considered reckless or illegal. We've come a long way in terms of safety, regulation, and awareness, but sometimes it's fun to look back and remember just how wild things used to be. Let us know in the comments, what do you remember from the 80s that's now totally banned? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a trip back through time.